Hello, this will be part one of a three-part set of videos to cover the events that lead up to democracy in Athens. It would make the most sense to begin our story with an examination of a quote from Shakespeare. All the world is a stage, and all the men and women are merely players or actors. If we accept this quote, and we think about these people, these men and women who make history, as actors, we can sort of set the events of history as if they were a drama or a story. For quite frankly, sometimes the events play out like a soap opera, and this set of events surely deserves to be categorized in that category. So let's go ahead and get started. There was a packet that went along with these entitled Ancient Athens, and we'll begin with a little bit of background knowledge. So, for starters, Athens is located in a region called Attica, and it is one of the largest polis in ancient Greece. It makes up a region roughly 1,000 square miles, which is a little smaller than Rhode Island, just for scale. So one of the largest polis in Greece is, well, smaller than the smallest state in the U.S. But Athens was one of the largest Mycenaean settlements to survive, and the Greeks claimed, well, the Athenians claimed to be autochthonos, or to have sprung from the ground in which they inhabited. Basically, they were there from the very start, before the moon was created, they claimed. And the Dorians came down and attacked, but they never really got very far. And quite frankly, one has to suspect they preferred the Peloponnesus because the soil is just so much richer there. Athens does not have a lot of great farmland. It has a little bit in the valleys, but quite frankly, a lot of it is quite clay heavy and mountainous, and it's terrible to farm. And this is actually going to be kind of important for part of our story. So, drama, betrayal, and intrigue in Athens. We will begin our story with what really should have been called the prologue. It was my fault for making it Act 1. But it's the story of Cylon. I know it says Cylon, and I really want it to be Cylon, but apparently there's no soft C in Greek, and it would be Kylon. So, with the Kylon conspiracy and the exile of the Alcmeonians, we will set the backdrop for the rise of democracy. So, in the year 632 BCE, the Olympic victor Solon, or Kylon, he was the husband of the daughter of the tyrant of Megara named Theagenes, and this particular courtship is kind of a funny anecdote. It's not particularly relevant, but I'm going to tell it anyway because it entertains me so much. Basically, it's the equivalent of Greece's Bachelorette, where Theagenes, the tyrant of Megara, decided that he was going to get all of the most eligible bachelors of all of Greece together and pay for them to stay with him for a year, and the best of them was going to get to marry his daughter. So Kylon won. When it got down to the final two, the other guy happened to start dancing wildly at a particular dinner festival, and was flipping on his hands and dancing on his hands, and apparently this was outside of the normal amount of dancing. And so Theagenes says to him, "You have just danced yourself out of a bride." And so Kylon won. And with his new family connections and the model of how Theagenes became the tyrant of Megara, he decided that he was going to become the tyrant of Athens. And it is here that we really get into the Athenian politics. So Kylon decides that he's going to take over Athens, and with his supporters, he marches into the Acropolis and tries to seize control. And this sort of doesn't work out so well because there's the Archon Megacles, who happens to, I guess, have a bigger or better army or group of followers, and they force the followers of Kylon to retreat into the Temple of Athena on the Acropolis. And there they're holed up. And in the ancient Greek world, temples are like base. There's a couple of things you can't do inside a temple, and like top of the list is commit acts of violence or murder. So as long as they're in the temple, they're safe. And Megacles, who's the Archon, cannot attack them. So he's waiting outside and just waiting. Because the moment they come out, he's going to totally murder them. But as long as they're inside, they're safe. And the problem is there really isn't any food or water inside the temple, so you can only really stay in there for a limited amount of time before you kind of die of dehydration. So they decide that the way they're going to get around this is to tie a string to the statue of Athena. And as long as they're connected to the statue of Athena, they're still on base and therefore completely fine, and no one can touch them. So with this string, they kind of cautiously work their way out of the temple and start navigating their way down to go get a drink of water. And apparently somewhere around the Temple of the Furies, the string apparently snaps. And Megacles says, "Oh, Athena has withdrawn her protection, kill them all." And so they lay into the spores of Kylon. And another version of the story is perhaps that Kylon, his rope might have been cut. Whatever the story is, the people of Athens decided that this didn't count, that Megacles had committed a sin against the gods, and he was forever unclean. So they booted him and all of his family and all of their buried ancestors out of the city, and they were considered forever to be cursed by what had happened. This curse, by the way, is going to show up later on in the story, so it's important to note that all of the Alcmeonii, the Alcmeonids, they are all cursed by what Megacles did. So, the next person we need to talk about is Solon the Wise. Now, part of the class, part of some of the stuff that we did before was reading about Solon. But Solon steps into the picture in 590 BC. And he steps into an Athens that was really in trouble. Society was coming apart, and something drastic needed to be done. We can think of this wise man as the George Washington of ancient Athens, though he has a little bit of Abraham Lincoln in him too. He's considered to be one of the 7 wisest people in all of Greece. I mean, if you think of, well, like, who are our 7 most important political figures, the 7 wisest people in all of the modern world, you get, like, Gandhi, and you get Abraham Lincoln, you mentioned Washington. These are the caliber of people that we're comparing Solon to. And for the Greeks, he certainly fulfilled that. So, what was it that needed changing? As we mentioned, the soil was really poor for a lot of people in Athens. And we know that Athens was really good at growing olives and wine and making pottery, and it had rich silver and marble deposits, but none of that really helps you if you're a poor farmer who's living on the edge. And you need to grow grain if you want to eat, but you can't really grow grain if the soil's really bad. So these farmers are stuck on the edge, and many faced crippling debt. And if one harvest went bad, they had to borrow in order just to feed their family, and if the next harvest went bad, well, then they're done. And in those days, if your loan, well, no one would give a loan to a poor farmer who didn't look like he's going to pay it back. So he had to offer his farm and his family's freedom as kind of a surety on the loan. So if the loan went bad, the farmer and all of his family would be sold into slavery. And this is a pretty brutal thing to consider. Your family is faced with either, we will starve this winter, or next year we might all be sold into slavery. And slaves in the ancient world had no rights, no recourse to abuse. They were treated as property, and they could be killed on a whim. They would have suffered horribly under that system. So, needless to say, the farmers who are facing slavery, and many of them have been hauled into slavery, and their families have been torn away from them, they're pretty upset. And it definitely doesn't help that the aristocrats are abusing the system to make more people have to get loans. And the society is on the brink of ripping itself into a civil war. We've seen this happen in other polises. This is a very real risk. And so the Athenians, recognizing this, turn to Solon. And he's an aristocrat, so he's in with the rich people, but he's considered to be so wise and so wonderful that he's trusted to make a fair deal. So Solon does a couple of things. First, he cancels debt. Anything that involves having your person as the backing for the loan, that's done, just canceled. And of course, this upsets a lot of people, but better to upset a few or even a lot than leave the city so upset that it's going to tear itself apart into a civil war. So he does that. He also works hard to to bring back the people who had been sold into slavery. So if you can imagine this as a poor farmer who's lost everything, your entire family has been, ripped out of your house, taken away, shackled. You thought you would never see them again. Solon is the guy who brings them back. He is the guy who restores everything, all of the things that matter. And you can imagine the loyalty that those people would have felt to this man. He is, in that sense, an Abraham Lincoln. But Solon also makes it so that if you're working the farm, you own the farm. You can think kind of in the post-Civil War Reconstruction period, there was a lot of sharecropping and tenant farming that was pretty abusive in how it treated the poor labor. Well, imagine if the president had said, if you work that piece of land, you own it. End of story. That's what Solon did. And in doing so, he creates a lot of more middle-class farmers. They're not great, but they're better off than they were. In this case, he brings up the poor. He pushes more for olives and wine because these are going to sell well, and this is going to increase the overall wealth of Athens. They can buy grain from abroad, but grow olives, grow grain, trade for the rest. Grow olives, grow grapes for wine, grow whatever grain you can, but trade for the rest. He also opens up the citizen role to any immigrant who has a trade. This is big for ancient Greece. Before, to be an Athenian, you had to be born an Athenian. If you weren't born an Athenian, you would never be an Athenian. And Solon, for the first time, says, hey, if you want to come join Team Athens and you can do something that'll make us better, come on, we'll take you. This is huge because this opens up the talent pool for Athens in a way that no polis has done before. So suddenly all of these great potters, all of these great smiths and weavers and all of these industries are coming to Athens, and Athens wins. They become the economic powerhouse of Greece because they're able to pull all these people onto their team who otherwise would have been excluded. Solon also changes it so that social rank is about wealth, it's not about blood. I don't care who your parents were. I don't care if you have the blood of kings and champions flowing through your vein. If you want to be in the top tier of society, you do it by winning economically. And this, it's not a true meritocracy because some people are born rich and all that, but it opens up the ladder for social mobility to people who could work hard and pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Solon inscribes all of his reforms into wooden tablets, places them in the agora for all to see, and then leaves Athens. He didn't want to have to sit around and hear all the people say, oh, Solon, I know you made these rules, but I want an exception because I blah, 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 sob story here. Solon, why'd you do this? Solon, I'm angry at you. They would have mobbed him all the time, and then Solon didn't want that. So he said, all right, here's my rules. Keep them. I'm heading out. See you guys later. But before I go, don't trust my cousin Pisistratus. The dude is a jerk. He will do bad things. Do not trust him. And it's in that spirit that we will turn to the next lesson. Spoiler alert, it doesn't really end well for Solon's laws there. Though, in the end it works out. Because after all, this is the path to democracy.